Hey guys, welcome back to Genshin Interact. In today's 4-star discussion video, we'll be highlighting Faruzan, her kit, how to build her, and how she can benefit your account. We are looking to create a Discord server whenever we hit 1,000 subscribers to create more avenues to answer more in-depth questions about your accounts and see what you guys want us to put out for video ideas in the future. Enough of all that, and now onto the video.
So the first thing we're going to be looking at is Faruzan's talents, abilities, and passives. Now looking at her talents, her first talent that we're going to look at is her normal attack. Her normal attack is nothing really special, but if you want to look for some extra damage for her, which normally people don't do, you're actually going to want to upgrade this just a little bit because this is what you're mainly going to be using along with her skill to get some extra energy as well as some damage in there as well. Next, we're going to be looking at her elemental skill, which is going to use her normal attacks. The elemental skill is called Wind Realm of Nasim Jin. Faruzan will deploy a polyhedron that does AoE Anemo damage to nearby opponents, and then she'll be gaining the Manifest Gale state. While in this state, Faruzan's next fully charged shot will become a hurricane arrow that will hit enemies that will deal Anemo damage. On top of this, when a hurricane arrow hits an opponent, it'll create the pressurized collapse effect on the opponents for all nearby characters hit, dealing AoE Anemo damage, which will pull nearby objects and opponents into itself. Looking beyond her elemental skill, Rift, what can you tell us about her elemental burst?
So her burst is called the Wind's Secret Ways. Basically, she will deploy what is called this dazzling polyhedron that will unleash a whirlwind pulse and deal AoE Anemo damage. And so while this dazzling polyhedron persists, it will continuously move along a triangular path. And once it reaches each corner of this triangle, it will unleash one more of these whirlwind pulses. And when this whirlwind pulse is unleashed, it will apply Perfidious Wind's Bale on opponents nearby. And this decreases Anemo resistance. There's another part of the Whirlwind Pulse that's also called Prayerful Wind's Benefit, and this is actually applied to your party members and increases Anemo Damage Bonus. And these are important to know by name just because we're going to be talking about passive talents, and knowing these different buffs by name is really going to help to understand what you're actually doing when you play Faruzan more specifically. So now that we know a little bit about her burst, we need to talk about some of her passives just to kind of understand just exactly how you are buffing your Anemo characters. So Vixen, what can you tell me about her passives?
Well, her first passive is called Impetuous Flow. Basically, in this point, when Faruzan is in her Manifest Gale state, which is that skill state that she gets, the amount of time that she does to do a charge shot is decreased by 60%, which is very, very nice considering a lot of the times you'd want to make sure that your foe characters are not getting interrupted when they're doing a charge shot, especially when they need to do charge shots because they take a lot of time. In this passive talent as well, she can also apply the Wind Secret Ways Perfidious Wind's Bale to opponents who are hit by that vortex that she gets when she creates the pressurized collapse effect, which pulls nearby enemies together. The Perfidious Wind's Bale effect is that effect that decreases opponents' Anemo resistance. So by getting this passive talent, you actually don't need to use the burst to get Anemo resistance on opponents that you're trying to hit so that your DPS can actually get some damage in without actually having her burst out. Rift, what can you tell us about her second passive talent now?
So looking at her second passive talent, it's called Lost Wisdom of the Seven Caverns. And when characters affected by her burst, when they deal Anemo damage using normal, charge, plunging, elemental skill, elemental burst, any type of damage really, they will gain the Hurricane Guard effect. And this states that damage will be increased based on 32% of Faruzan's base attack. And that's important to note just because it says base attack. It's much like Bennett and Kujosara, where this doesn't mean you want to go full attack scaling on your artifacts and all that, even with the weapon. You actually, and we'll talk about weapons later, but you really want to go for high base attack if you're wanting to get the most out of this passive. One instance of Hurricane Guard can occur every 0.8 seconds. And this damage bonus will be cleared after Prayerful Wind's Benefit expired or after the effect is triggered once. And just remember that with this passive talent, the Anemo damage bonus is coming from Prayerful Wind's Benefit within the burst. So that's why we talked about earlier, knowing the terminology difference between Perfidious Wind's Bale, which is Anemo resistance decrease on enemies, and Prayerful Wind's Benefit, which is Anemo damage increase to your characters.
Now we're going to be looking at how to build your Faruzan. First looking at her weapons. First we're going to look at some 5 stars, and then we're going to look at some 4 stars. The 5-star that you're going to want to use for Faruzan is the Energy Recharge Bow Elegy for the End. This weapon is going to be great for Faruzan because it's got a high energy recharge at level 90 at 55.1%, and it's got a high base attack at 608 to make sure that you can use that base attack passive talent that Rift was talking about earlier. The buff on this weapon is also going to help out tremendously, as it will increase elemental mastery for Faruzan, giving her maybe a little bit of extra damage, and as well you're going to be gaining sigils to give all of the characters in your party elemental mastery as well, and their attack increase as well to make sure that they're going to be doing more damage, as well as you're going to be using Faruzan with a lot of Anemo characters to make sure that you give them as much buff as possible. So this will help them get even more damage, especially since they'll be based off of elemental mastery to swirl a lot. Now looking at 4 stars, probably her best weapon, even above Elegy for the End, is Favonius Warbow. This bow is going to be especially amazing for Faruzan and probably her best weapon because it has such a high energy recharge with level 90 at 61.3% energy recharge. Its base attack is a little bit lower than some of the other weapons at 454 at level 90, but because of this, you are going to be getting a lot of energy recharge. This is going to make sure that your burst is coming back even quicker. And since her burst gives that Anemo resistance decrease to opponents and Anemo damage bonus to your own characters, this is going to make sure that she is the perfect support for you. Next, looking at some of the other bows like Sacrificial Warbow, this is going to have a higher base attack than the other bows, even the 5-star Elegy for the End at a base attack at level 90 at 565, but it does take a pretty big hit on the energy recharge at level 90 at 30.6%. You're going a little bit heavier into the base attack to make sure that you get as much from that passive as possible. If you are going to be using this bow, you want to make sure that you have a lot of energy recharge from your stats, either using an ER Sands, which Rift will talk about in a second, as well as maybe some other avenues that you're getting a lot of energy recharge for Faruzan. Some other quick mentions of some other bows that could be useful are End of the Line and Fading Twilight. These have some good abilities alongside of them, and making sure that they also have some good energy recharge to make sure at the end of the day, the biggest thing about Faruzan is getting her burst back to make sure that she helps her party members do as much damage as possible.
Moving on to the next section, we're going to be talking about artifacts for Faruzan. And I wanted to talk about some sets here, and I have something interesting I want to talk about here. So most people you may hear are going to tell you, because of how unique, and I don't want to call Faruzan niche, but she is niche to really just buffing Anemo units. So her artifact sets aren't going to be as picky, but most people will tell you using 4-piece Viridescent is going to be your general best, just because she, as an Anemo unit, can still swirl an element, and if you have some other sub-DPS supports, maybe in your Wanderer or Zhao team even, you can buff their damage just by throwing on Viridescent pieces with high ER for your Faruzan. So she isn't terribly hard to build because of that. But also, one thing I did want to mention about artifact sets, while using Viridescent may just be the best route for her, this does change, in my opinion, when you get her Constellation 6. Basically, her Constellation 6 says that when the active character deals damage while affected by Prayerful Wind's benefit, and that, again, that comes from her burst, they will apply the Pressurized Collapse to the opponent that they damage. The Pressurized Collapse, again, comes from the skill. So this kind of changes things for Faruzan, where you can actually use a 4-piece Tenacity, because whenever you're dealing damage with your on-field character, I'll use Wanderer for instance, you use a C6 Faruzan burst and you're now dealing damage with your Wanderer, you're going to be causing Pressurized Collapse every 3 seconds. And what this can do is, because Pressurized Collapse is considered skill damage, you can trigger Tenacity's 4-piece effect, which is giving attack and shield buffing every 3 seconds. So that's why when you get her Constellation 6, this can change things up. And that is all up to you. She does become a lot more useful specifically for buffing your on-field damage dealer when at Constellation 6, just because now you have the option to use 4-piece Tenacity and get full use out of it. But moving on more to stats, Vixen, what can you share with us on stats?
If you are going to be building Faruzan on a lot of that higher energy recharge, you are going to be wanting to use on the main stat for your sands and energy recharge. It's going to make sure, once again, that you're getting her burst back as much as possible. The main stat on your goblet should be an Anemo Damage Bonus goblet, and even though some people might say to use attack, you're not getting anything extra from that passive talent, by the way, because it is base attack. And either way, from attack percent or Anemo Damage Bonus, you are just getting more damage in general, and the Anemo Damage Bonus does help just a little bit more. If you are going to be using a weapon like Favonius Warbow that we talked about is probably her best weapon, you are going to want to use a crit rate circlet because of that talent that it has to, when on crit hits, give a lot more energy to its characters around it. The substats you should be looking for on all of these pieces are energy recharge, crit rate, even a little bit of crit damage, and possibly some attack. Now we get to the part where we're going to be talking about upgrading your Faruzan by using a lot of the materials that you're going to need. So Rift, what can you tell us about the different materials that Faruzan's going to need and where to find them?
So the boss material that Faruzan will be using to upgrade an Ascension is the Light Guiding Tetrahedron, which you can farm from the Algorithm boss in the desert. Of course, she will be using the Anemo Crystals in her upgrades, but she will also be using Henna Berries, formerly known as Red Crusts. And these are a little harder to farm and can take a bit of time just because of how spread out they are in the desert. But this can still be achieved, of course, by going to other people's worlds, of course, asking them if you can borrow these and go ahead and grab those Henna Berries. She will be taking the satin claws that the Eremites drop, and we'll have graphics on the screen to show you these. But she will be taking these, so make sure you're farming some Eremites to upgrade her and her Ascension, and you'll also be using these for her talents as well. Looking specifically at her talents, the domain you're going to be doing is the domain that drops the guides to admonition. And so with that being said, you will need Sumeru unlocked or have gone there and unlocked the domain, of course. And the boss material you'll be wanting to farm are the puppet strings from the Scaramouche weekly boss. So again, keep in mind, you'll need to go through story to get to that point. So if you are early game and you have Faruzan maybe, and you just pulled Wanderer, we do have Wanderer out right now, and you also by chance got a Faruzan maybe on standard or elsewhere, just know that if you want to actually build and use her, you will need to get all the way to Sumeru's story. Moving on to our last section in this video, we're going to talk a little bit about the teams that Faruzan can fit in. And yeah, this will be a little shorter just because of how unique Faruzan is and kind of she has a singular role. But Vixen, what can you expound upon with what teams Faruzan can be used in?
Looking at the teams for Faruzan is actually very, very minimal. She's only really going to be helping a lot of the other Anemo damage dealers, whether that's going to be Zhao, Venti, and Jean, who are mainly who you're looking at to do a lot of damage, as well as the Anemo main character. Or if even you have a C6 Kazuha who gets that Anemo infusion, she could also help him out, as well as she's just going to be helping out decrease Anemo resistance from all enemies, and she's going to be giving an Anemo damage bonus to her party members. All of this is going to make sure and help that Anemo on the team is going to do more damage. She doesn't do a lot of damage in and of herself, so pairing her with another Anemo character is heavily suggested. Like I said before, a lot of the characters that work with her as a main character that I love to use with her is Zhao. Now, I also use a team with her that is going to be like Mona and Bennett. This is going to bring a lot of those decreases down, as well as give Zhao a buff to his damage, while throwing in Faruzan gives him a huge buff in that Anemo damage department, as well as decreasing the Anemo resistance of the bosses around me. Looking at someone even like Anemo main character that everyone should have at the beginning of the game, you could even use Faruzan a little bit to help, considering that this is going to help bring that Anemo resistance down, as well as an Anemo damage bonus to make sure maybe that early part of the game just does a little bit better for you. Besides that, there aren't too many teams that Faruzan really can fit in. Even if you put her on a 4-piece Viridescent, she can maybe fit into a soup team or something where she swirls, and that's really all she's trying to do is just swirl to maybe get her burst off, do a little bit more personal damage for herself, so she could be a sole character on a team that is the only Anemo character, but this is not really recommended considering she has so much to offer to help other Anemo damage dealers with her. That will end Faruzan's discussion video for today. Let us know in the comments if you'll be going after her. If you have her already, let us know how she's impacted your account, both positively or negatively, and if you have built her. Once again, we are looking to create that Discord server at 1,000 subscribers, so please do like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.